My name's Brenna, and I decided to do my project on the negative impacts of meat production and consumption. Before we can look at the negative impacts of meat production and consumption, it's important to understand just how much meat we consume. This map illustrates global meat consumption. For the purpose of this project, I will specifically look at the production and consumption of meat in the United States. As you can see, the United States has one of the highest rates of meat consumption per capita globally. On average, each person in the United States consumes 120 kilograms of meat a year, which is equivalent to 265 pounds. So just how much meat do we eat? As a nation, we consumed approximately 52.2 billion pounds of meat in the year 2012. As you can see from the graph on the left, over the past 100 years or so, meat consumption has risen dramatically. The picture on the right shows how much of the different kinds of meat the average American eats in a year. In 2012, the average American ate approximately 71.2 pounds of red meat and 54.1 pounds of poultry. Overall, we as a nation overconsume meat. Dietary Guidelines for America advises that adults should consume no more than 0.21 pounds of meat a day. However, the average American eats approximately 0.36 pounds of meat every day. Obviously, Americans eat a lot of meat, more than just about any other nation, but how is that meat produced? In order to produce a quarter pound of ground beef, it requires 6.7 pounds of feed, 52.8 gallons of water, 74.5 square feet of land, and 1,036 BTUs of fossil fuel energy. All of these resources for a single quarter pounder that you could find at any local fast food restaurant. Now just imagine all the resources required to process the billion and millions of chickens, cattle, turkey, sheep, and hogs in the year 2013. All of these resources exploited to produce meat for Americans to consume has a profound impact on the environment. One of those impacts is water use. Nearly half of all the water used in the United States goes to raising animals for food. Also, runoff from manure, pesticides, and fertilizers pollute waterways more than any other industrial sources combined. I plan to relate this impact to the reading titled Global Water Crisis. Another impact is emissions. Methane from cattle generates an estimated 20% of overall U.S. methane emissions. The management of soils emits nitrous oxide, which accounts for over half the total emissions from the agricultural sector. Finally, management of manure contributes to 80% of ammonia emissions. Consuming too much meat has been scientifically proven to increase health risks. Red meat and processed meat in particular have been linked to heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and various forms of cancers. Studies blame high levels of saturated fat, cholesterol, and carcinogenic compounds to be related to these health risks. The image on the right shows the link between processed and red meats in relation to carcinogenic classification groups. Processed meats have been identified as having the compounds that cause cancer. Red meat is classified in the group below the processed meats as having a significant link to cancer. If we know meat is bad for the environment and bad for our health, then why are we continuing to overconsume it? At this point in the paper, I will relate most of my research to other class materials, including David Hemmelgreen's article that discusses the basics of nutritional anthropology. He says the most basic premise in nutritional anthropology is that the definition of food, its symbolic meanings, and its uses, and the social context it's consumed in, are in large part determined by culture. I will be discussing the culture that we have regarding meat, as well as how price, genes, convenience, and habit also affect how we consume meat. For my ethnographic component, I decided to go meatless on Mondays with a group of my family and friends. I decided to do this as my experiment because I wanted to reduce my meat consumption and therefore reduce my impact on the environment and develop better health habits. I conducted 3 interviews with a handful of my participants before going meatless on Monday, halfway through the 6 weeks, and after the 6 weeks was over. Almost all of my family and friends that participated in Meatless Monday with me had a positive experience. Some of the participants said they will continue to not eat meat on Monday even after this experiment is over. I learned through conducting my interviews that the greatest challenges associated with going meatless was convenience and habit. By going meatless on Monday for 6 weeks, the participants and myself decreased health risks and conserved resources.